Hey guys, Will here. So today we're taking a look at a wheel that you've probably seen pop up in a few of our other review videos recently. So this is the SOELPEC Spectra XR wheel, and it's very quickly become one of my favorite wheels that we've ever looked at here at Boosted Media. Really high build quality here, as well as an extremely feature-rich wheel. So we're gonna be unpacking all the details of this wheel today. By the end of today's video, you should have a good picture of whether this might be the wheel for you. So let's get started. Now, as is always the case here on this channel, there are a couple of important bits of information which I need to disclose to you guys before we get into the review. So firstly, a big thank you to SOELPEC for sending across the wheel for us to check out. Also a big thank you to Hybrid Racing Simulations, or HRS here in Australia, for helping to get the wheel across to us as well. We really do appreciate their support. They've been helping us for many, many years now behind the scenes. So big shout out to Brett at HRS for his help there. Now, normally when we review hardware, we have some sort of an affiliate link that you guys are able to use to help support the channel. So if you do decide you want to pick up one of these wheels, it would be awesome if you could just quickly check that description box to see if there is an option at the point in time that you're watching the video. But as is always the case here, no sort of third party has any external influence on what we're saying at all. Everything that we're going to be sharing in today's video is just purely our own observations and our own opinions. We will be cross-comparing against a couple of other wheels in today's video as well. So it's important that you're aware that those wheels were all sent to us under the exact same conditions. So let's dive into the SOELPEC Spectra XR wheel now, starting off with pricing. So as is always the case with pricing, make sure that you're checking your own local taxes, import duties, and all those important details. Also make sure you're shopping around for the best price from whichever reseller is going to be most suitable for your particular location as well. But at this point in time, looking at the SOELPEC website, the price for this guy is €14.99. That doesn't include any sort of taxes or shipping. So it puts it in a similar kind of ballpark to something like the GSI Formula Pro Elite that we looked at over a year ago now, and the Cube Controls CSX3 that we looked at a little bit more recently. Pricing on the Formula Pro Elite in particular, I've noticed, is fluctuating quite a lot at the moment. There's quite a few resellers that have it quite a bit below the pricing that we looked at when we reviewed this guy. So it definitely seems like at this point in time, for wheels in general for sim racing, it definitely does pay to shop around and make sure you're getting the best possible deal in your location. So certainly not a cheap wheel by any means, but as I was saying earlier on, very, very feature-rich wheel. One of the most feature-rich wheels that we've tested historically here on the channel. So let's start off by running through the key things that I think you need to know about this wheel. Then we'll dive more deeply into the software side of things and of course what it's like to drive with. Okay, so first important detail here is that if you are looking at ordering one of these wheels, there are a few different color options available. You can also order additional hat switches to further customize the look of the wheel if you wish to do so. It doesn't give you the option to fully customize the order like we've seen with some other manufacturers, but as you can see on the website here, there are a selection of different colors that you can start off with as a base point. And I really like the look of this neon configuration that we have here. Of course, all the LEDs are 100% configurable, as you'll see later on in today's video. So we've got a 302mm diameter here, which does make it quite versatile in terms of the kinds of different cars that you can drive with it. Obviously, being a more Formula style wheel like this, you're not going to be driving rally cars or anything like that. But if you're looking at something that's going to allow you to drive everything from, say, GT3, GT1, GT2, GT4, for example, all the way through to your Formula open wheeler style cars, then this is a pretty good fit. Personally, for me, I prefer somewhere around the sort of 280 to 290mm mark for driving F1 style cars. I do find 300 to be a little bit on the large side, but that is more just a subjective personal preference thing. I believe that real life Formula One cars are actually somewhere between about 300 and 310mm. If I'm not mistaken, I spoke to a Formula One engineer about this about a year and a half ago now, but I can't remember 100%. But either way, I think that you're going to adapt to this absolutely fine. So I certainly don't see the diameter being an issue. I think it's a good choice for the style of wheel. While we're talking about diameter as well, it does use those rubberized grips that you've heard me say in multiple videos now I'm not a huge fan of. The reason for that simply being that it does tend to feel a little bit sticky, a little bit tacky under your hands, and it does also have a tendency to pick up dirt and debris, dead skin cells off your hands, and gross things like that. But again, that is a very subjective thing. It does offer a good level of grip. I didn't find that after long sessions it got too sticky and clammy under my hands and sort of became slippery or anything like that. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I do prefer the slightly harder material that doesn't have that sticky feeling that you get on the CSX3 from Cube Controls and a couple of other wheels as well. But yeah, a lot of wheels in the last couple of years have moved towards using this grip material. So I think that I'm probably just being fussy here and most people don't find it to be an issue at all. But just so you're aware, it is that sticky material that we've referenced in the past. Now we also have a beautifully vibrant 5-inch display here, which I believe has a resolution of 854 by 480 pixels. That resolution sounds one's a little bit low, and it does look very sharp. They don't actually list the spec for the screen on their website at all, but when I plugged it into SimHub, it does pop up with a part number, which I was able to kind of, you know, go in and have a bit of a search, and that seems to be the resolution that's listed for that particular part. But I'm not 100% convinced on that, because it does seem to be very sharp. Absolutely no issues with reading any of that small text that you can see on there. Color contrast and everything is all very, very good. There's no issues with ghosting or bad viewing angles or anything like that, even though, you know, with the steering wheel, you're going to be looking square on most of the time anyway, so viewing angle isn't generally an issue. But yeah, no issues with screen visibility whatsoever. Just so you're aware as well, it is a fully SimHub compatible screen, so you can customize your own screens, do everything that you're able to do within the SimHub ecosystem. They also do have a very detailed and very, I guess, comprehensive profile, which they preload, which we'll show you later on when we get into the software side of things as well. They've done a really good job at making sure that you've got everything that you need out of the box, so you have a good experience, which hasn't always been the case with every other wheel that we've tested in the past. We have had to do quite a bit of stuffing around to get things up and running, working perfectly. In the case of this wheel though, we literally just followed through the instructions, installed SimHub, installed all of their profiles, and everything just worked straight out of the box, which is an excellent experience. So then we also, of course, have an RPM strip across the top here, as well as flag LEDs. Again, fully configurable backlights on all of our buttons here as well. Again, we'll show you all this in SimHub a little bit later on. And then we get onto our inputs. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 push buttons on either side of the face of the wheel. We also have push button functionality for all of our rotary encoders, as well as our thumb encoders on the side. And then if we flip the wheel around, you'll also see a brake magic button, as I like to call them, on either side here as well. Those are really convenient for deploying DRS, ERS, making adjustments like that on the fly. Basically any feature that you want to be able to enable quickly without having to take your eyes off the road or adjust your hand position. So very convenient placement. There, ergonomically, the wheel's fantastic as well. We'll talk about that in more detail later on. And then you've also got 2 7-way switches here as well. So left, right, up, down, push button and rotary encoder functionality for either one of those. I really do like wheels that have 2 of these, because you can assign one to adjusting your black box settings inside the car and the other one to navigating through your menu. So that generally means you're able to navigate your way around the sim directly from the wheel itself, which is always a useful thing. And then looking on the back again quickly as well, you can see 2 magnetic shifter paddles, which are very, very stiff. They've got a really solid action to them. There are also included inside the box as well a couple of replacement magnets if you want to adjust the feeling of those. But I actually really like the firmness of those shifters, and there's no flex really there to speak of at all. They are quite a long throw, which means you do feel a little bit of sponginess if you really get into it, but certainly nothing to complain about. And then 2 analog paddles on the bottom here as well, which are fully configurable. You can use them as a bite point clutch or anything else that you want. You've probably also noticed the other button on the bottom here as well, which allows us to adjust various other settings, which we'll look at later on as well. So that is pretty much everything in terms of inputs and outputs on the face of the wheel. How does it feel in terms of build quality with regards to the buttons? So happy to say this is definitely right up there among the best wheels that I've ever tested in terms of button feel. They actually do give us a reading for these buttons of 700 GF for the tactile switches. What that means in real life is that they have a good amount of squish to them, a nice sort of intentional feel when you push down the buttons. There's no rattling or anything nasty like that. They are plastic button caps, but they've got a very, very high quality feeling to them. Absolutely nothing to complain about there. If we compare those across to Cube controls, which look very similar, these buttons are a little bit more snappy, I guess you could say. They don't have quite that initial cushioned feel. I mean, there's not a whole lot in here, I'm nitpicking, but I would say that I do prefer the feeling of the SOELPEC buttons very slightly over what we have on the Cube controls wheel, but it's not a reason to pick one wheel over the other. I don't think there's very little in it. If we go back over to the Gomez wheel again, these are metal button caps, which some people love. I do personally prefer the feeling of these buttons. I just think they feel a little bit more mechanical, but they don't have quite the same snap to them. They don't have quite the same, I guess, intentional press to them that you have with the SOELPEC wheel. So if you find that you're bumping these buttons by accident, maybe activating them with gloves on when you didn't realize that you had, then you may prefer the feeling of these ones. But yes, objectively, definitely right up there with the best of the best in terms of button feel for those guys. Rotary encoders have an exceptionally good feeling to them. So just the right amount of mechanical resistance. You can feel a nice solid click or detent in each position. One thing I did notice on my particular wheel is I think there's a little bit of a manufacturing defect on the dial on this itself. I think one of the little ridges there sticks out a little bit further than it should, and it's actually catching on the metal here, which means I have to push the dial up a little bit to get it to rotate past its 0 position. So you can see where the grub screw is there. that first little notch sticks up a little bit further than it should, so it's actually binding there against the metal. But yeah, it kind of, I was wondering why it wasn't working occasionally when I was driving, and then I realized that was what was going on. So let us know if you've had the same problem, if you own one of these wheels. I might just get them to send me out a replacement switch, I think, but it should be just as simple as unscrewing it, sliding it off and putting another one on. No issues at all on this side. But other than that, no complaints there whatsoever with regards to the feeling of it. They are both push button as well. And as you'll notice, the screen actually does react when you push the buttons too. So you can actually thumb through and have that adjust various different things inside the sim and then wind the value up and down, which is really cool. I'll take you through this software later on though. Same deal with the rotary encoders on the face too. These also do have push button functionality and a really, really nice feeling, really nice snap to them in each position. Just the right amount of mechanical resistance, in my subjective opinion, to feel very comfortable with or without gloves. So really good job they've done there as well. Again, just to quickly cross compare here, very similar feeling, if not identical, I would say, to what Cube Controls are using on their wheel. They may even be exactly the same part. I'm not 100% certain on that, but everything does feel very, very similar. Now, one of the things that I complained about with the Gomez wheel is that I wasn't a huge fan of the feeling of these rotary encoders. Just for the price of the wheel, I felt that they were a little bit, they could be a little bit tighter and a little bit more intentional. So yeah, they do feel a little bit looser than what you get on this particular wheel. Not a massive amount in it, and again, I am nitpicking here, but these are the kinds of details that people are interested in if they're spending this kind of money on a wheel. But yeah, I really do feel like they've nailed the feeling of all the buttons on the face of the wheel. The shoulder buttons or brake magic buttons have a really nice feeling to them as well. They've got this kind of plastic dome over them, so you can push them on any angle and they activate quite nicely. So if you really get on the side, it becomes a little bit more difficult, but yeah, you can kind of roll your finger around it and it works very nicely. We already talked about the feeling of the shifters, the paddles. As you can see here, analog paddles have got plenty of throw on them as well. One thing to be aware of is that there isn't any adjustment in terms of the angle or the throw on any of these paddles, but look, I don't really see that being an issue for the majority of people. You know, unless you've got really massive hands or really tiny fingers, I think the positioning of these is going to be pretty much fine for anybody. And for me, obviously, as you can see, it's pretty much perfect. It nestles in there very nicely underneath my top knuckles, which is ideal. So yeah, no complaints there in terms of feeling whatsoever. So let's get in now and talk about some of the other materials that they've used to actually construct the wheel. So the first thing I noticed when I unboxed this wheel is that it was a lot lighter than I was expecting it to feel for such a feature-rich wheel, and definitely noticeably lighter than both the Gomez and the Cube Controls CSX3. So the weight of this guy comes in at 1,350 grams, and it is constructed primarily from 6061 anodized aluminium. So you can see all the shell of this guy is completely aluminium on both sides, and then we have a carbon fiber, which is genuine carbon fiber inlay on the front here as well, which does give it a nice classy look without, in my opinion at least, being too over the top. One of the things that I've complained about with some wheels is that they do tend to go kind of a little bit too over the top with all kinds of things going on the face of the wheel. The CSX3 isn't too bad actually. I'm not a huge fan of the plastic shroud around this guy. I do prefer the kind of more traditional clean design that we have here, but again, a very subjective thing. I really do like the overall look and feel of the Gomez wheel by comparison. It's just a more minimalistic design in general that looks more like what you would find on a real life race car, again, in my opinion. It just doesn't have anything there that doesn't really need to be there, whereas this does have a little bit more going on visually. The benefit that you do have with that though, of course, is if you are driving in VR, then it does make it very easy to feel where your positions are for each of your switches, although I don't think that most people that are driving in VR would probably be forking out for a wheel like this that has an inbuilt screen anyway, because a lot of the functionality you have here is kind of wasted in VR. But if you are driving in VR, it does work very well. So you've got an aluminium structure throughout this wheel, which does make it very, very rigid. You can see in the footage that we're overlaying here, in terms of flex and twist on the rig, absolutely minimal, nothing at all to complain about whatsoever. One thing that I do always test on every single wheel now, particularly these open bottom wheels, is that there isn't excessive flex in these bottom halves that aren't connected to anything. Something that actually did catch me out with our review of the Porsche 911 wheel from Grid Engineering was the bottom of this wheel does actually have quite a bit of flex in it, which I didn't notice when driving, but a few people did complain about in the comments. When I went back and revisited that, I did actually notice it for the first time. So that's something that I always specifically check for in every single wheel now. But you can see, holding onto that guy, there is quite a bit of movement in the bottom of the wheel compared to this guy, which has basically nothing. There's no plastic creaking or groaning or anything like that, obviously, because there's no plastic in the construction of the wheel at all. But yeah, overall, I think they've done a really good job here of making it feel nice and solid and well built in the hands, but also not excessively heavy either. They've obviously put a lot of effort into that. And you'll notice as well just how thin the wheel is too. Again, if we hold it up next to the Gomez wheel, you can see the difference there. So again, not something that necessarily has an impact on the overall experience of using the wheel, but just something that I thought was interesting. So a couple more super quick things just to cover off very quickly here for you if we flip the wheel around. So on the back here, you can see this hub, which they kind of integrate into the wheel to allow for easy mounting. Now, this has got a standard 70mm stud pattern on the back here. They include inside the box these little captive screws, which actually allow you to mount the wheel in either direction. So if you're mounting a quick release from this side, you can put the screws through from this side and bolt in. You can also mount them in from the back, although it is quite tricky to do so. There's not a lot of room to work with in the back here, particularly in these areas down here. And you can actually see some rub marks on this button here from when I was actually trying to get the Allen key in there to tighten these up. So not the best experience, although possible, trying to mount from this direction through to this side. But if you are going from the back side through to this side, then it's pretty easy. You just go straight in. And the reason why they include these captive screws is so that if you've got a quick release which actually has a thread on the quick release itself, you can put this through and it's not going to end up thread binding and causing issues. So quite a clever little inclusion there. And just everywhere you look, little attention to detail, things like this are very high, particularly on the software side, as you'll see in just a minute. So nice that they include those. And then again, continuing along that thread of attention to detail, you'll notice the nice thick USB cable, which we've got connected through to our PC so that all the displays and lights and everything work for you guys. That is a very nice high quality connection, same kind of connection as we see on a lot of other wheels in this kind of price bracket these days. But then behind this little carbon fiber window, there's a little pin header, and they also include this little USB pigtail connection. So if you have, say, a Acertech hub, which has that integrated standard USB protocol, you can actually connect this through, put your Acertech hub on, and then have all the wiring pretty much completely concealed within the hub itself, which is a really nice touch. So again, attention to detail, they're including and thinking about all these little things that people might want to do just to make the experience overall a little bit cleaner and a little bit more refined, which I think is really great. So yeah, everywhere you look in terms of hardware, very, very good quality, absolutely nothing to complain about objectively really at all. So just quickly before we move on over to the sim rig, I also want to touch on stickers, because this is something else I think they've done a really fantastic job of. So unlike a lot of other wheels that come out of the box with no stickers pre-installed at all, they do actually pre-install a pretty good selection of stickers here for you. These are textured PVC stickers as well, so a really nice feeling, very similar to the stickers you get with Grid Engineering's wheels, which we've raved about in the past. So they do also include a sheet of stickers here as well, if you do want to change those, as well as a set of tweezers inside a little bag too. So if you do want to make adjustments, you can choose from a selection of other stickers here. Another thing that I really like about these is the fact that the buttons themselves actually have a little indentation, which allows the sticker to pretty much sit flush with the face of the wheel. So it does make it a little bit more challenging to change those stickers over, but what it means is that the stickers don't have that tendency to move around and slide off or reposition themselves underneath your fingers, which is something that we have had happen on pretty much every single Cube Controls wheel that we've tested in the past. Now, I haven't put a massive amount of driving time into the CSX3, and you can see we haven't seen too much movement on the stickers here, but generally you'll find that pit button there, you can see the stickers drifted down a little bit. I find radio button in particular, if you're doing a lot of online driving, that does tend to drift around a little bit on the Cube Controls wheels. But yeah, hasn't been an issue. As I said, I've put many hours of usage into this wheel now and not had any issues with stickers coming off or repositioning or anything like that at all. So again, little attention to detail things, but I think that's everything you need to know in terms of the wheel and its hardware. So let's dive over onto the sim rig now, and I want to take you through the software and configuration side of things with this wheel. I know that sounds kind of boring, but there's a lot of things that you can do here with this wheel straight out of the box that I've not seen from any other wheel, at least out of the box in the past. So I think it's definitely worth covering all this. So let's jump over onto the sim rig now, and we can take a more detailed look. Okay, so first thing that I want to highlight here is the importance of connecting the wheel via a powered USB hub. Now, we did run it without a couple of times on a couple of different PCs and it was okay, but we have seen issues with other wheels, particularly with this type of screen, the Vocor screen, I believe they're running on this, where you get funny tearing effects or disconnections, just general glitchiness if you don't have a powered hub. So recommend doing that. It does say that in the instructions as well. So speaking of the instructions, another thing I want to highlight here is the quality of the documentation that they've included with this wheel. So we're going to run through it and kind of go through some of the features now and take you through some of the things that I think are most important for you guys to know if you're considering buying one of these. So let's scroll down through these instructions a little bit here, and you can see it's very well presented, very professional. The English is okay. There's a little bit of broken English in a few places, but you know, you can certainly understand what they're trying to say, so there's no issues there. Explanations of the things that we've already covered over on the table earlier. And we're going to get down into connecting to the PC. So here's a bit where it talks about the importance of connecting via a hub, as we just mentioned. And then we go down to software installation. So there's a couple of things you've got to do here. Long and the short of it is you need to go to their support page. There's links on that PDF file. You need to download the dashboard. You need to install the fonts as well. And then also the SimHub plugin, which you drag to the root directory of SimHub. Again, there's a user guide downloads here if you don't already have them. And then a link down here to their Discord server as well, which I did check out. I wasn't active in there, but I sort of had a bit of a look around over the last couple of months to see what people were up to, and you know, just sort of seeing the vibe of the place. There's a few people sharing their own profiles there. There's plenty of support going on there too. And yeah, didn't see any red flags at all. So they seem to have quite a good community growing around their brand, which is always good to see for a brand new brand like these guys are. So that's what you need to download. Install this dashboard as you would any other SimHub dashboard. You just double click the file and it'll import it into SimHub. As I mentioned, plugin you just drag to the root directory. So we're going to go back to the user guide now. You can also download the latest version of the display driver if you don't already have that installed. This actually runs the same display as other wheels that we've tested in the past, so I don't need to do that on this particular machine. And then when you go across into SimHub, we're going to enable the plugin. Now we're going to go into devices and add new device. We're going to start to type SOELPEC, and it should show up pretty quickly here. We're going to click OK, and we should see the wheel spring into life. There we go. All right, so we're going to a splash screen. And you'll notice down here, we've got the SOELPEC plugin listed on the left-hand side because of that checkbox that we clicked earlier. Now, I'm not going to take you through absolutely every single thing that you can do here. You guys by now are well aware of the customization that you can do inside of SimHub. So you can tweak things and adjust things to your heart's content, basically. LED color profiles, whatever you want. Sky's the limit, basically. Your creativity is the only limitation there, literally. But having said that, the cooked-in profiles here do have a lot of functionality, more than I've ever seen in a sim racing wheel before. So I want to run you through some of this now. So on this little tab here, you can see some of the basic functionality all listed, button labeling and whatnot. So you can see in real time what's going on with the wheel there, for example. You can also tweak from here which adjustment you want to be assigned to each one of your encoders and whatnot too. And then you can also set up presets too, which I'll show you in just a second. So you can name all the presets from here should you wish to do so. Listing of all the button labels, and then some of the other functions that you can enable and disable, which we'll show you a little bit later on. But what I want to do now is take you back to the display on the wheel. And what we're going to do is we're going to push on the settings button on the back of the wheel, and that is going to bring up our settings console. So this is all done through SimHub, but it's the most powerful implementation by far that I've ever seen. So this is all kind of allowing us to make adjustments to our wheel settings, but do it all directly from the wheel itself. So let's go back to the display of the wheel now, and let's actually run through the manual here, and I'll show you what some of these things do in reality right here on the wheel as we go through here. So we've got labels here, as you can see, for our various different buttons. We'll scroll down a little bit more. First thing that we can do is switch between the various different color profiles, including the dash 2, which we're not going to be able to see at the moment because the splash screen is going, but I'll show you this a little bit later on too. But if we hold down the mode button on the left-hand side here, and then turn our center dial, you can see it actually goes through various different color profiles on the wheel itself, which is really, really cool. Now, again, you can customize all of this if you wish to, but very cool that you can do that directly from the wheel. Let's go back to our default. We then scroll down. The next thing is just talking about the profiles on the dash itself. Again, we'll jump into the sim and I'll show you that a little later on. Let's continue on here. Clutch and paddle modes. So we've got a wheel settings button on the back here. We can push that, and that brings up this special console here. So if we continue scrolling down, clutch and paddle modes. So very similar to what we've seen on some other wheels, but really cool implementation here where you can actually see on the display itself exactly what you're doing. So our left-hand side here is our course adjustment, which goes in 10% increments for our clutch input. So you can see if we pull one paddle, release one side, it's going down to 30.2%, and then we release the other side and it goes back down to 0, adjusting up and down in 10% increments. So we'll start off at say 70%. Second one is 1% increments, so a slightly finer adjustment here. So say we wanted 71, 72, and then far right hand side is our finest adjustment here. So very cool that we can make these adjustments from the wheel itself without having to alt tab out of the game or rely on LED. I mean, those LED configurations that we've seen on other wheels do the job just fine, but this is a much cleaner way of doing it. Just better visual representation of what's going on. Now, if we continue to scroll down here, you can see we've got various different modes as well. So in static mode, the slave paddle only reaches to the bite point while the master paddle reaches 100%. So this is our master on the right-hand side. You can see it goes all the way up to 100. This one only goes up to 70, and then when you combine the two, it behaves like so. Then we can switch to dynamic low mode simply by rotating the wheel. Either paddle by itself only reaches the bite point. Both paddles together reach 100%. So regardless of which one I pull, it's going to my bite point, and then when I pull them together, it goes all the way. So that means that rather than having a master and slave side, you can basically release whichever side you want to achieve the desired outcome. So then dynamic high mode, kind of similar, either paddle by itself reaches 100% clutch, press both paddles and release one to return to the bite point level. And then we also have throttle and brake mode too. So that just maps as a throttle and brake inside the game if you can't use pedals for some reason. And then we can push our settings button on the back to go back to our main dash. Again, we can also thumb through our various different presets on the wheel here that we saw a little earlier in the configuration as well. So very, very, very cool. So if we continue to scroll down, we have our clutch calibration process, which is just holding down this button for 4 seconds. That brings up the calibration process. As you can see here, no need to run through that in any more detail, I don't think. So I've put the car out on track now to show you some of this next stuff live on the dash itself. So next up, we've got the dual action thumb encoder. So this is pretty simple. You can either have the push button be mappable inside the game to whatever function you want, or you can set it up in this dual mode as we have it here now. So you can see if I tap on that, it goes into ABS mode where I'm able to wind my ABS up or down. If we tap it again, it changes into brake bias mode where we're able to adjust our brake bias up and down. So those would both be individually mappable inside the game, and then the function would be determined by the mode that you have the wheel itself in, which is really powerful. So scrolling on now, we've got center encoders with push button and turn functions. So pretty self-explanatory here. You've got the normal function, which you can map to either direction of the turn. You've got the push button functionality as well, but you can also map a function where you push in and turn while you're still pushing down, and that will allow you to adjust a second function inside the game. So in total, you'd have 6 different values which you could adjust with these 3 encoders on the face of the wheel. So then we have latching radio button. Again, pretty self-explanatory here. Normally you would hold down the button with your thumb to enable the radio when you want to speak, and then release it when you don't want to speak anymore. With latching mode, which is enabled by holding both these buttons down for 4 seconds, you'll see it pop up on the screen, latching mode enabled. Now, we push on to talk, and we push it again when we've done talking, and it will disable. So you got to obviously be careful you don't accidentally leave it on. So this is something that I found was particularly useful when driving in, say, a practice session where you just kind of want to chat with people as you're going, and then you switch it back to non-latching mode for the race, for example. So that was something that I did actually make quite frequent use of. So then we have our brake magic button. Now what this does is it allows us to actually drag our brakes under certain conditions. So say for example, you're stuck behind a pace car, the brakes are getting too cold and you want to just drag them all the time, rather than having to drive with your foot on the brake the whole time. What you can do is enable this brake magic mode, and we're going to hold down our mode button and the brake magic button for 4 seconds to enable it. And you can see there it popped up and said brake magic now available. And then what we can do is we can hold down our mode button here again and wind our thumb encoder up and down, and that is going to adjust the amount of percentage of brake input up to 30% or down to 0%, depending on what you want. So it's just going to be a trial and error thing there. You can adjust that to whatever value you want, and then you disable it or enable it using that button there. So you can see when it's not active there on the display, it's disabled. Click the button and brake magic active at 20%. Similarly, there's also a throttle hold function. Now, I'm not sure exactly where you would want this, but let me know in the comments down below what creative ways you can think of to use a throttle hold function. But it works exactly the same way. We hold down our mode button and the right-hand side button behind the wheel, available throttle hold mode, and then we hold down our mode button again, and we can wind up and down the value to whatever we want. So say we want the throttle automatically held at 100%, we click that, And then we can, I guess, give our foot a little rest while we go down a straight and then switch it off again. So yeah, not sure why you would want that, but it's available. So then there's also a neutral mode, which basically just puts the clutch to 100% with the push of a button to simulate the effect of having the car in neutral. So to enable that, exactly the same again, you hold down the mode button and the escape button for 4 seconds to enable it. And then once it's enabled, you push the escape button. You can see neutral mode is on, clutch is at 100%. Off again, and it takes you back into the driveline being engaged. So then on top of that, of course, there's a ton of stuff that you actually have on the display itself that's built into this profile. So let me just quickly drive out on circuit here. You can see at the moment we've got our pit box displayed, but once we're out on track, you can see that disappears. Now you've got a Delta display up the top here. You'll see this in some driving footage a little bit later on, but what we can do is we can push on our Delta button. That's at the moment is Delta display off. We can have session best Delta, last lap Delta, all-time best Delta, and then back to off. We also can thumb through various different displays on either side here too. So rather than it being a completely refreshed display with a completely different look and feel, it's basically just like a little page within the section itself. So we can see our leaderboard there. We've got our track position as well, and then our last lap, estimated lap, and best lap on the right-hand side. So I might leave that on track position for now. And then we can also thumb through our telemetry on the left-hand side here as well. So you can see that one gives us a live display of our brake and throttle inputs. We've got tire information and fuel there too. And then back to our driver ahead and lap delta. Now again, the sky's the limit here. You can adjust this however you want, but you can see it all updates here very quickly in real time as we're driving around the circuit. Even the track map there as well is not jerky or unresponsive at all. It's very, very, very quick. So yeah, I mean, like none of this is stuff that you can't do with other wheels, but I've never seen all of this integrated in such a clean way, straight out of the box with no stuffing around at all. I think they've done an absolutely remarkable job of integrating all of this. So yeah, there's a ton of extra stuff that you could of course do, but that gives you a basic rundown on the core functionality of the wheel.
Green light.
So to summarize the experience of using this wheel overall for the last couple of months that I've been testing it out, and I've got to say, look, from every angle that I can kind of approach this, it's been a really good experience. Ergonomically, really great, no complaints there whatsoever, suits my hand size really well. Button feel, as we mentioned earlier, is absolutely fantastic as well. Haven't had any software glitches to speak of whatsoever, which I'm actually really surprised about. I think the level of integration that they've achieved here with their default profiles, which come out of the box and you know, just plug straight into SimHub, they've done an absolutely fantastic job. That's one complaint that I've had with some other wheels in the past, and I know a lot of other brands have improved that aspect of things significantly over the years. But you know, there have been some other wheels that it's taken us days of kind of, you know, going back and forth with developers and even having to rely on third-party profiles made in the community as well to get things up and running the way we've wanted them to. But absolutely no issues here to speak of whatsoever. Everything has worked exactly the way it should directly out of the box. No issues with flex or anything like that. Rattles, shifters feel good, paddles feel good, everything feels really, really great, and I really have absolutely nothing to complain about whatsoever. So yeah, there's really not a lot more to say that we haven't already covered in terms of the driving experience. And just with the product overall, I think that, you know, it achieves everything that it sets out to do very, very well. I think that it's fairly priced for what it achieves as well. There obviously are a lot of other cheaper wheels available on the market, but when you look at the feature set and the build quality that you have here, I think it nails everything it needs to at this kind of price point. And for that reason, I think it's right up there with the best of the best, from build quality all the way through to driving experience, software, every aspect. It does a really, really great job, and I have absolutely no issues with recommending it whatsoever. So I really hope that today's video has helped you out. If it has, please do hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss out on future review videos like this one. I know that it doesn't necessarily have a large impact on what you see in your news feed these days, but it does have a large impact in terms of telling YouTube that this content is beneficial so that it shows it to other sim racers like you guys. So we really do appreciate your support there. But above all, thank you very much for watching, guys. Leave a comment down below if you own one of these wheels. Let us know what your experience has been like, anything that we've missed in the video. And it would also be really good to hear from you in the comments if you've maybe considered one of these wheels and ended up buying something else for some reason. Let us know what your thought process was there. The more information we can get for viewers down in the comments below, the more beneficial it is for the community overall. So we really do appreciate your contribution in that way as well. But above all, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye.